It's RealGM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Today's Monday monologue touches on whether or not we are right or wrong about how we think about the Grizzlies firing their head coach, Kevin Durant's future in Phoenix, and whether or not the Houston Rockets are a serious team in the Western Conference playoffs. Let's jump in. All right, what's up, everybody? Monday morning monologue here for Real GM Radio. I want to touch on three what-if scenarios that I was thinking about over the weekend. We're going to talk about the Grizzlies, the Phoenix Suns, and the Houston Rockets here. Let's start with Memphis. They fire their coach, Taylor Jenkins, on Friday with 9 games left in the regular season. The Grizzlies have been in a free fall since the All-Star break. The record is good. The record's been good for basically every season under Taylor Jenkins, outside of last year when they didn't have John Morant for most of the season, dealing with a ton of injuries. But this is a decision that feels like it might have been made in the preseason, or it felt certainly like things were going in this direction. They promote Tumas Lisalo. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably saying it wrong, but he was a decorated coach in Europe for 2 years, won Coach of the Year, was really successful in Paris. And over the offseason, Memphis overhauls Taylor Jenkins' coaching staff, right? Taylor Jenkins, all-time winningest coach in Grizzlies franchise history at the time of his firing. But they overhaul his coaching staff. Zach Kleiman, the GM there, in charge of doing that part of it. They bring in Tomas. They bring in a bunch of other guys. They bring in this LaRoche guy who also got fired along with Taylor Jenkins. And at that moment, you started hearing like whispering around the league, like, what's Taylor Jenkins' role here? How's he feeling about the front office kind of coming in and maybe dictating is too strong of a word to use, but having a pretty heavy hand in what his coaching staff is going to look like. So you sense that this was brewing for a while. And if you ask Grizzlies fans, this is actually overdue. And I want to get to the fan part of this because like sometimes I love listening to fans. I love going to fan podcasts. I love listening to like the Locked On shows, the local guys there who are covering these teams every day. You read the beat writers. Like I love going to these things because they have an insight that nobody else has of their team, right? They're thinking about it, talking to people, covering the team every single day. But sometimes the fans, when it comes to the coaching, I tend not to listen to them, right? Grizzlies fans were like, this is a long time coming. National people who were sort of up in arms about firing Taylor Jenkins. Grizzlies fans were like, you don't understand. His rotations have been bad. The offense has been bad. We're just unhappy with this guy. We've been unhappy with this guy. But fans are always unhappy with the head coach. If we always listen to fans to make our head coaching decisions, I remember when I was covering the Golden State Warriors for the San Jose Mercury News, like it would be daily that people would come at me and be like, we got to fire Steve Kerr. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Covering the Miami Heat now, we got to fire Eric Spoelstra. I was lucky enough to cover 2 of the best coaches and 2 of the longest tenured coaches in the league over these last few years, and it doesn't stop fans from being like, he's the problem, fire the coach. So fans are always going to want to fire the coach when things aren't going the way that they want. That said, in Memphis, there was certainly some, feeling among the front office that something had to change. And again, there's whisperings around the league like, we don't really know how happy the Grizzlies and Zach Kleiman are with Taylor Jenkins right now. So 2 things really sealed the deal for Jenkins. Three things really. The record since the All-Star break, the fact that they haven't beaten a team over 500 since February 2nd. So it's been longer than just the All-Star break. This team has had a tough time beating the teams that they would have to beat in order to take that next step in the playoffs. So there's that. Reports saying maybe he lost the locker room. We remember the sideline fight a couple weeks ago, all that kind of stuff. So that's obviously not great. And then the offense didn't work. And in addition to overhauling the coaching staff, they also overhauled the offense. They tried to go away from pick and roll. They tried to go more towards this egalitarian ball movement, less reliant on ball screens, more versatile type of offense, which, some teams that makes sense. For this Grizzlies team, I thought it didn't really make sense because not only do you have John Morant, who's one of the best pick and roll guys in the league and clearly thrives in that kind of system, but then you use the 9th overall pick on Zach Edey, whose real only function in the NBA, at least on offense, would be as a pick and roll, screen setter, roller kind of big man who can make plays out of the short roll and kind of hit those more mid range type shots, and then obviously get to the basket a little bit. So That wasn't working either. And I'm reading a lot of stuff. I can't really get a sense of whose call it was necessarily to change the offense completely, but it feels like with this firing, the Grizzlies front office is laying the blame at Taylor Jenkins. And as the head coach, he certainly deserves some fault for that, if not a lot of fault for that. So that's where we are with this. We can talk about the offense and what it's going to look like going forward and all these things. In reality, again, reading some of these stories, I think DeMichael Cole, who covers the team there in Memphis, did a really good job of laying this out. It just feels like the GM and the head coach didn't get along. Kleiman, Jenkins, they didn't see eye to eye. And you could take whatever side you want. Was Kleiman right? Was Jenkins right? Were they right to fire him with 9 games? Whatever. This seems to be the reason. And we can try to parse through some of these things, and you can look at some of the pick and roll advanced stats and whether or not it was working, or whether or not the new offense is working, getting to their record over 500, whatever. At the end of the day, if the GM and the head coach aren't getting along, the head coach is probably getting fired because the GM kind of calls that shot. And if things don't work in Memphis for a few years, Kleiman could be the next guy. I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think Kleiman's actually done a lot of really good work in terms of building that roster and drafting some of these guys. But if he really did have a hand in this coaching staff and the way that this team wants to play, I think that was probably a misuse of the roster that he built. So what if the Grizzlies are right? That's sort of the what if here. Crazy to do it now, but if you were always going to make this decision, if it always felt like you were going to fire Taylor Jenkins, then why not do it now? And at least you can get this Thomas guy in there, see if he can work some magic in the regular season and in the playoffs, and say, well, we gave this guy a shot. Maybe it's something that works long term. Again, not sure I love the process and all this stuff here. Not sure I love the decision to fire Taylor Jenkins. I thought he was a really good coach, but if you were always going to do it, you might as well do it now if you've sort of made that decision. And look, it might not be crazy. It might have been the wrong call to fire Taylor Jenkins the way that they did it, but if this guy ends up being great, this Tumas guy is really decorated. People really like him. If he ends up holding on to this interim job long term, maybe this is it wouldn't be crazy, in other words, for the Grizzlies to be just as good as they are now, if not potentially better. Next one. What if Kevin Durant has played his last game for the Phoenix Suns? This one seems more like a likelihood than a what if, but he rolls his ankle against the Rockets on Sunday in the third quarter of this blowout game. They were down by almost 40 at the time. Not even really sure why he's playing there, but I give credit to Durant. He's been out there. As disinterested as Phoenix has looked at times this season, Kevin Durant really hasn't. He's had moments, but for him to be playing the way that he's been playing, I mean, he's been playing at an all-NBA level. For him to be playing this way and giving that effort and being out there when in another blowout, you gotta give credit to the guy. I think he's doing all the right things as much as possible this year. The Suns are 11th in the Western Conference. They're in a game and a half back of 10th, and this just feels like it's over. They're 2-11 without Kevin Durant in the lineup this year. He's going to get an MRI, not going to travel with the team for this 3-game road trip. But it feels like we're packing the bags on this Phoenix Suns season, if you hadn't already, which I was pretty much there already. They could shut him down. He does have to play 3 more games to be eligible for All-NBA. I would assume Phoenix lets him make that call, right? If he can he's at 62 games now. If he can get to that 65-game minimum by the end of the year, then he's eligible for All-NBA. So something to look at, but that's really just a Kevin Durant thing, not really a Phoenix Suns thing. But it feels like we're at the end of the road here, right? I mean, just a perfect scene. Maybe the final sort of flashbulb moment of what has been a really disappointing Phoenix Suns season. They're going to trade him this summer. You saw Brian Windhorst talking about that. Shams Charania has talked about it. They've tried to walk it back a little bit maybe and like, well, we'll see. But everybody knows that they're going to trade these guys or they're going to trade Kevin Durant in the summer. So what happens? I don't actually think the Rockets are a good pick or a good fit for Durant. I don't love it for them. He's 36 years old. They just saw up close and in person sort of the perils of relying on a 36-year-old superstar, nonetheless, but a 36-year-old superstar. And this is a young team. I don't know that they want to break up a part of their young core to go get this guy. To me, Devin Booker makes a lot more sense. There's no indications out of Phoenix that they're going to be trading Devin Booker. If that becomes available, that would be something. But then if I'm Phoenix, the other part about this is, the Rockets own Phoenix's picks. They have 3 first-round picks coming over from Phoenix between now and 2029. Everybody says, well, Phoenix, trade Kevin Durant to Houston, get control of your own draft back. I don't know that that's like a definite thing that I want if I'm the Suns. Maybe I say, well, we're going to trade Kevin Durant. Maybe we get a couple good pieces back, a couple rotation pieces. We still have Devin Booker. There's some pieces that we like here. Are we sure we want to go all the way in the tank? Because if you trade Durant to Houston and get your picks back, doesn't it also behoove you to then trade also Devin Booker? I don't know that Phoenix wants to do that. So I would be, if I'm Houston, I don't want Kevin Durant. If you trade Booker, that makes a lot more sense. But if I'm Phoenix, I'm also not necessarily trading Durant to Houston for my own picks back that are not going to be, they're not going to be great. Like we're probably not picking in the top 5 with those picks unless we win a lottery or get some lottery luck here. So I would be looking all around for Durant trades. The 2 teams that come to mind, obviously, are Minnesota and Miami, the 2 teams that kind of kicked the tires on Durant before the trade deadline. Those talks didn't really go anywhere, it sounds like. Maybe a little bit further with Minnesota. I heard from Miami, didn't go very far at all. Phoenix basically asked for everything, and Miami was like, we could tell you're not serious. We don't have time for this. We got to trade Jimmy Butler. So now that they have a little bit more time, you're not dealing with a trade deadline kind of looming and breathing down your neck there. I can see those teams getting back in the mix this summer. I also look at, Memphis. What exactly is going on there with the direction there? Could they get involved in Kevin Durant? If they're obviously cool with making some dramatic decisions here, do they say, yeah, maybe Kevin Durant, we don't think he's going to resign here, but he could be our Kawhi Leonard and he can kind of get us over the top here. The other one is San Antonio, right? I've brought this up a lot, but you traded for De'Aaron Fox. You've got Victor Wembanyama on a rookie contract. You might as well treat him like the Eagles traded Jalen Hurts a couple years ago and say, hey, this guy's good enough on a rookie contract. Let's take advantage of a little window here. Let's go get Durant, pair Durant, De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama together, flesh it out with some role players. Maybe we can make a run here in the Western Conference. I don't know if that's necessarily the guy that I would want, but if he's out there, he might be the best guy that's available for San Antonio and say, yeah, 36 years old. We're only dealing with it for a couple of years. Let's see what works. Let's see what happens here. And Durant's not one of these guys who's going to get in the way of Victor Wembanyama necessarily in terms of his development. So the other team I look at is Boston, right? This ownership group has come in. They're saying all the right things, all that stuff. We also heard a lot of this STEM stuff from Dallas when they got sold. I'm not saying that the Boston thing is going to be the same as the Dallas thing. I would actually be very surprised if it was similar to the Dallas thing. But if this team that's going to take over in 3 years, when they take over, that's right when Jaylen Brown's contract escalates all the way to that $60 million figure. If they're not psyched about paying the second option on the team $60 million a season, they could say, well, we can maybe make a short-term trade, swap Jaylen Brown to Phoenix, get Kevin Durant, pay him for a couple of years, and then by the time we're in control here, maybe we've won another, maybe we've won 2025, maybe we won in 2026 or something, maybe in 2027, whatever. And we still have Tatum, we still have some guys we like. I don't know. I would be obviously shocked if that were to happen, but it's a name that's been out there. It's a team that's been out there for Durant, so I might as well have mentioned it. So what if Kevin Durant has played his last game in Phoenix? It certainly feels like that's going to be the case here. Last one here. What if we're overlooking the Houston Rockets as a serious team? Everything about this team on paper screams contender. They're not. You can look at all the stats and some of the records against and all that kind of stuff. They're not quite at where Cleveland, Oklahoma City, Boston are in terms of all that stuff. But they're clearly in a tier by themselves, and then it's everybody else. When you're looking at their record against some of the best teams in the league, they are one of only 4 teams in the league. Matt Moore, who will be on later this week to do tiers with me, pointed this out. They're one of 4 teams, the 3 teams obviously being the 3 favorites, that have a winning record against teams with a 60% win percentage at the time of them playing them. Their record against teams with a top 10 point differential is awesome. Cleaning Glass keeps track of that stat. It's a great stat. I love that stat. They're great, right? They've got a plus point differential. They're 15-12 against teams with a top 10 point differential. Their offensive rating is good in those games. Their defensive rating is good in those games. Their defense is awesome. They have one of the best 5 defenses in the league. They have a ton of different looks. They have a ton of different guys. Some of it is scheme and coaching by Ime Udoka, who does a great job there, and they're awesome in transition. They don't let a lot of points go. They're incredible on the offensive boards. They're going to kind of suffocate you on the glass a little bit, and that's going to make it a challenge. So the scheme stuff is all there, and the players seem bought in. Even like Jalen Green is defending in some of these games, but even the individual stuff is really good. Right? Asar Thompson is an awesome defender. Tari Eason is an awesome perimeter defender. Jabari Smith Jr. can really hold his own in different lineups. They're playing these 2 big lineups now where they present a lot of problems for teams with their size on the court. And I think this is Udoka kind of saying, well, if we're playing Denver or Minnesota or some of these teams that are a little bit big, Oklahoma City in the playoffs, we might need these two big looks. I like that he's experimenting with that towards the end of the regular season here. This is a team that is taking the playoffs seriously. And it feels like nobody that's looking at the NBA is taking them seriously. They're second in the Western Conference. They've been there for basically a majority of the season. Feels like for 70% of the year, they've been the 2 seed in the West. That's not an exact number, so don't quote me on that, but feels like it. Jalen Green has been awesome. And that's when you get into the Houston Rockets conversation, everybody recognize, like, all that stuff I just told you about the defense isn't a secret, right? Like, I'm not breaking news here. But everybody says, can they score in the playoffs? What does their half-court offense look like in the postseason? They don't have a guy who can close games for them. And these are the things that you keep running into, and I keep running into, right? I'm not sitting here telling you I'm going to pick the Rockets, but the way Jalen Green has played over this final stretch, he's shooting 20. He's scoring 26 points per game on 44% shooting in the last 10 games. He's making better decisions with the ball. Nothing crazy. Jalen Green's never going to be an amazing passer, but when he makes simple decisions and kicks out to the guy in the corner on the pick and roll, Houston's offense just rolls, and it'll look like it's just super functional for quarters at a time. And they still have those moments where they get back into the mud, and you're like, how's this team ever going to score against the Thunder or the Warriors or some of these teams with really good defenses in the Lakers when they're engaged, the Timberwolves, the Clippers, like in a potential first-round series. Like, how are they going to score against those teams? And that is a huge concern. But then when Jalen Green has it going and Fred VanVleet is healthy and making shots from the perimeter, and he started in a little bit of a slump and he's gotten a little bit better as the season has gone on, this team just feels like it's better. And it starts to work a little bit more. When Jalen Green scores 30 points, this team is 12-1 this season. It kind of answers both questions, right? Or it addresses both questions. The first question is this team one scoring piece away from being an elite team? The answer would be yes, because when Jalen Green is that elite piece, and it's only been for 13 games this year, but when he is that elite piece, their record is 12-1. Everything just sort of clicks into place, and this team just kind of takes goes to another level. But the other question is Jalen Green that guy? And he has been recently, but he hasn't been the entire regular season. He doesn't really have the playoff resume or experience. But what if Jalen Green is this year's Anthony Edwards? What if he's Ja Morant from a couple of years ago, where we're just like, whoa, okay. Look, he was a top pick in the draft. This guy is like super talented. Nobody questions that. And if he could just put it together for a run, who knows what can happen with Houston? So I look at them and I'm like, everybody obviously feels really good about the Thunder, or most people do. Mo Dakhil, my guest last week, wasn't super psyched about the Thunder's chances. But, then you get into the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Warriors. Like, nobody's really taking the Grizzlies seriously after this coaching change, or even before that, really. Houston's won a lot of games lately. They haven't beaten a lot of good teams. It's similar to when the Warriors first got Jimmy Butler and they just went on this huge run, and I'm like, oh, who are they playing? But you go down the list after Oklahoma City, it's like you could poke holes in any of these teams, right? And maybe whatever, like you feel a little bit better about some and then you do others. And I'm not putting Houston at the top of the list there after you get past the Thunder, but all these teams, the point is, have holes. And with the Rockets, at least defense is there. The coaching is there. There's a lot of good players on this team. This team's talented, but they're young, and they don't have that piece unless Jalen Green can be that guy for a long stretch. I'm not saying that the Rockets are making the finals. I'm not even saying that they're going to make the Western Conference Finals. But it just feels like everybody is looking at the Rockets as a 2 seed and saying, yeah, well, Minnesota or the Clippers will probably upset them in the first round. And I don't know that I'd go quite as far as to say that that's a guarantee, where it feels like that's just sort of a fait accompli by a lot of people that are looking at this stuff. So if I were going to rank all my what ifs in terms of, I suppose, likelihood, what if Kevin Durant gets traded? That seems like that's going to happen, all but guaranteed. And then I'd probably go, well, what if the Memphis Grizzlies made the right decision? Or what if they end up not looking wrong, as some of the outrage would lead you to believe after firing Taylor Jenkins? I'd probably have that as the second most likely thing. Like, it wouldn't be crazy if they were like fine after this. And then with the Rockets, What if this is a serious team? That would admittedly be surprising, but I did think it was worth bringing up since they've been winning a lot of games, and Jalen Green looks as good as he has. That's the Real GM Radio Monday monologue. I'll be back later in the week on Wednesday night. Matt Moore will be joining me for our monthly NBA tiers. We'll talk to you then.